Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of the e-learning show with Origin Learning. On this show, we'll be discussing and sharing our experience in designing, developing, and implementing learning technology, content, and solutions. Every fortnight, we'll bring one of the practitioners from instructional design to graphic design to share practical tips, hacks on learning technology and solutions. So if you're responsible for training for your customers, partners, and employees, then you should follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. You'll be able to find the link in the description. Today, I have Rajith with us. He's Senior Director UI UX with Origin. He has about 15 years of experience in designing and delivering learning solutions. He has been leading design team for Origin for the last 7 years and responsible for all our client engagements from innovative startups to Fortune 500. He's also been instrumental in designing Fractal LXP that won NASSCOM Design Award last year and Brandon Hall Silver Award. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Rajith.
Hey, thank you. Thanks a lot, Sajjan, and hi all.
Yeah, thank you for joining. First things first, I think let me start by understanding the role of design in increasing learning effectiveness.
Okay, so when we talk about design, it's a large area. It involves a lot of process, right from understanding the problem, then conceptualize things, and then derive to a proper learning solution. So there are a lot of process that happens within the design journey. But with respect to my domain, coming to visual design and UX, user experience design, so the effectiveness in terms of how the content or the learning content is presented to the learner in a much more engaging way. So that is a key, because we have been working on learning solutions from since a long time, and over a period of time, the mode of presentation, the style we deliver the content, the media we deliver the content, the technology we use, everything changes. So in one way, it is very important to catch up with that advancements, both in terms of what's happening around, like how the user behavior is changing, and cater to that requirement. At the same time, how to create a learning solution that is catering to all the enterprise or whatever type of user we have, whatever type of learner we have, satisfy all their needs, and help them do good at their work, whatever scenarios they are in. So coming back to very specific terms of design, graphic design or user experience design, what we do as a team at Origin, we observe what's happening around, basically, and understand the requirement right from the first interaction with the client, understand the requirements from the user, and what is their background, what is their cognitive part, and what is the type of content we are going to deliver. So all these things are studied well, and then we derive an effective solution for them, so that it actually helps them understand the content much more effectively, and use and retain that knowledge in a better way. So that's what how the design part is playing a good role. And coming back to Origin, what Origin does, so we have a different departments that cater to this design process. One is instructional design, so that's the part where we define the content structure flow, and it comes to the visual design and the experience design part, where we define what kind of media style we are going to use, what kind of storytelling techniques we are going to use. So then it's a collaborative effort, and all this at the end creates the right solution for the user, the learning experience also.
Right. So when you talk about addressing various challenges in learner environment, right, what are the typical customer challenges that you see in the business environment?
Okay, so we, from our experience in dealing with the clients and the requirements, there are two scenarios I could just think of. One is like the client, is very clear with the requirements, so everything is laid out properly. So the specifications are clear, and it's very easy for them to put down all those factors, and it's easy for us to consider them and derive a learning solution. And the second type is there'll be a concept, maybe a requirement, but the details are not very clear. So then it comes to our department to dig out all the details, understand each and every element of the requirements, and define specifications. Then we are going to suggest the client like, okay, this may be one good approach for this particular situation, and we can have multiple options. There'll be different concepts presented to the client. Then something will be picked from that and then work on. So that's a little more challenging process, because there'll be continuous conversation between the client and our team, and there'll be a collaborative work happens. So, and it's challenging as well as it's interesting. But sometimes what happens is there'll be a more organic way of doing it. The client will be very specific on the requirement, but as we go through it, as we deliver the concept, there can be iterations happening on. So sometimes the requirements are not very clear, but as we go through the process, there'll be new ideas coming in, and we will change accordingly. So there'll be an organic process. So all the things are like challenging in a positive manner, but we take that as an opportunity to improve that solution part, and try to deliver the best. So
Right.
yeah.
I think you make a very valid point there in terms of defining a very clear requirement. But of course, there will be scenarios where the requirement is not very clearly defined. It's probably yet to be firmed up, right? So what are the some of the best practices to maintain design consistency through the learning program?
Best practices in the sense, uh, we can think of a checklist basically. So these are the things that we require before even attempting a solution part. So that will be like, what are the areas we need to cover in terms of user analysis, what is the target audience, and what type of content we are dealing. And I mean, there are a lot of other things, secondary things or tertiary things, but we'll just categorize all these parameters. That includes the bandwidth of the actual learner, because we can't use heavy graphics or heavy animations in that learning program. So there are a lot of aspects we consider. So creating a checklist about the actual scenarios, the user behaviors, their background, their ability to adapt to a new technology, or maybe their comfort level with the new technology, or their comfort level with the existing technology. What is their understanding level on an interactive mode of learning? So if you can just have a checklist and tick them before you get into a solution process, that will be much more safer. And um, another thing is like to avoid assumptions. Obviously we will be put some assumptions while we work on the proposal and other initial design process, but as soon as we get into the projects, it's better to avoid assumptions, because then there'll be a lot of rework, because we take something in a different way, but there'll be a completely different perspective the client wants or the learning requirement has. So these are some way to avoid misalignment in your process. And another thing is like to be updated in terms of the presentation style, what's happening around the trend, the contemporary style of media, and appropriate use of technology, more flexible. And when we talk about responsive design, then that's another key, because many people are like they are comfortable learning on a mobile device. So all these things are valid points. So we need to have a checklist for all these things.
Sure. You spoke about having a checklist, and then you spoke about having some assumptions when we are creating a design, or when we are creating or designing an e-learning program. Um, so at the end of it, how do you go about testing the e-learning course that you design? Let's say from a navigation perspective or interactive perspective, the learners come from different background, they have a different uh, learning maturity. So how do you go about testing the e-learning courses that you design for multiple stakeholders, multiple profile?
Okay. So unlike in a product design scenario, we don't have a proper user testing for all the learning content right now. The reason is the target audience, the availability or the reachability to all the actual learning learners are limited. But what we do once we are clear with the requirement, and once we put all the checklist and put all the parameters in place, so that becomes a base for us to test it for its efficiency. So that parameters will be used for testing at our end, like the quality as well as mostly but even when we do quality check, there'll be one perspective, one learner's perspective applied to it. So how the user is going to see it, and how easily they can find information, how easily they can navigate from one part of the content from and to the another part, how easily we can have an interface where we can switch between topics, or if you want to non-linearly, if we can navigate. So all these things will be like documented, and that we'll use that document for testing. And as a user testing phase, when it goes to the client, then there'll be an user, the actual user will be taking those content, and immediately you'll get the feedback. So based on the feedback, it's easy to update it and send it back.
Right.
But and yeah,
Yeah,
and
sure. Please go.
sometimes it comes with experience, because as we are working with the client for some time, then we kind of know the trends and the pattern, the learning pattern, and the acceptance pattern and all. That also helps to a large extent.
Sure. You brought a very valid point in terms of learning pattern or acceptance pattern from a client side, and of course, the clients differ, their requirements are a lot differ. But as a designer, or as a somebody who is responsible for delivering UI UX, what are some of the fundamental principles, for creating an interactive, engaging e-learning course?
Okay, so the best practice part is a dynamic process, according to me, because what I find is whatever that worked 5 years back or even 2 years back doesn't work now. So that's what I have noticed. The reason is, um, so there are a lot of things are advancing in terms of technology, in terms of exposure to different media. So the users, the actual users are also evolving. So one challenge for us designers to accommodate all these changes in our design process. So at the same time, you should be empathetic with the actual user. At the same time, you should not underestimate them. So because of all the changes happening, the behavior changes, the user behavior, the behavior. I mean, when they interact with a system or a device or a technology interface, it changes across time. So we need to accommodate or include that aspect in our design, uh, because we can't just give something that we found very successful implementation 5 years back and deliver the same stuff saying that it's a good design, because their expectations and the relevance is different right now. So the relevance is a key point. So what we do at our end, we keep looking outside about how these trends are emerging, like even in a learning content, or in educational or entertainment or media content, how the trends are happening. And if we can just align with that, make our product or solutions contemporary, and that's where it goes really well. So that has more acceptance, and it really works good, because people are very comfortable with devices and technology right now. Most of the learners we are dealing with, they're much more advanced in terms of using technologies and interacting with it, digital interface and all. So we take learning from all these data. Sometimes we do research, sometimes we read about best practices and case studies and all. So all these things still come to our own process when we attempt it.
Sure. So, isn't while we appreciate emerging consumer technologies and changing customer behaviors, it's also tricky for organizations from a shelf life perspective, right? So, how do you actually go about increasing shelf life of e-learning content?
Okay, shelf life. I think there are multiple parameters. one is, as I said, the relevance, like the relevance of the content. So that is the primary key, I think, because as long as the content is relevant, then okay, it stays for a long. So it can be a technical content, it can be any documentation, any learning content. But there is other scenarios is the media where we present it. So I'll give you an example. Classic example is, so for a long time, e-learning was primarily dependent on a tool called Flash, Macromedia Flash. Okay, then now we know how it changed and all. So nobody is using Flash because of security and browser compatibility issues and all. So the technology and the tool we used made it non-relevant for some reason. So there are a lot of courses and learning content we created. It's more like converting already existing content, created with Flash, to a different medium or different output format, and we had to find a combination of tools to achieve the same stuff, because Flash was a powerful tool to produce animations, interactivities, games, everything together. But right now, when we talk about HTML based output, then we'll have to use After Effects for animation, then embed MP4 into it. Then we create HTML based interactivities. We use Articulate Storyline for building interactive. So it's like combination of different tools, but still we achieve that output in some other way. So that's one area where we need to update the content, update the learning content. And the third aspect I could think of is the presentation style, the way we tell the story. So, as I said, no, unless we are along with the trend or the contemporary style, then something look outdated, and the effectiveness also comes down. So, as long as the learners are interested and engaged with the learning presentation, then it makes sense. Otherwise, we have to think about it to revive or change or update, modify it. So I think I could think of these three scenarios.
Sure. So you spoke about the evolution of technology or tools, and there has been emerging consumer trends and changing customer behavior. What do you think are recent innovations in design concepts, and how do you think organizations can apply them?
I'm not sure about the question. Sajin, can you?
Yeah, so I was just saying, so you would see that there are a lot of innovations in the design itself, right? There are design
Correct.
concepts that are evolving based on new technology, new software, new UI, new browser. Um, so how should organizations apply these design concepts? Uh, have you seen any recent innovation in the design?
Okay, I got it. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a very interesting question, because when we started working on e-learning content, I remember we started with, yeah, obviously there were different complexity levels in terms of interactivity and animations and all. But it was more like a very simple way of like screen-based navigation. Then there are, it still applies, but right now the trend is moving. Everybody is trying to apply new technology, new way of teaching or learning things. So that includes learning content developed using virtual reality and another augmented reality components we have designed. So interactive and immersive learning is something that is really catching up. Even we have worked on virtual reality based content. So something that I found interesting is, like I mentioned before, users are getting updated with their exposure to technology. The behavior is changing based on their day-to-day interaction, their exposure. So it's easy to translate or maybe give a better transition of one media to another media, so that they can easily catch up. And these new technologies offer a lot of possibilities to make it even more interesting. For example, if you're talking about virtual reality based stuff, so that experience is something that you won't get in a PC based or page turner kind of a course or learning content. So we have done 360 video based courses, and in virtual reality, there are interactive sessions where we can actually walk into an environment, and in the environment we can pick out things, and you will get information about that. You can play videos, you can do some other activities. Even there are very technical things, something in engineering content. We have an engine component which we can actually go and interact with that. We can actually dismantle it and see in real world. So it gives a different experience. So it's like you're actually in the space, and so that experience is something really great. And we have done for another client who's into the oil and rig industry, where we can actually walk into the desert and see how that rig equipment is functioning. So we can change your position. You can actually walk around that equipment and see how it's functioning, and you can change your altitude. And so these are the things which were not possible initially when we talk about animated or image based or interactivity based content. So that is something really interesting, and we are trying to explore and find out what are the next level opportunities to use these kind of advanced technologies into learning, because that opens a new avenue altogether. So yeah.
Right. So when you talk about delivering immersive experience, right? I mean, what do you think the future of 2D, 3D? A lot of courses are created just by using PowerPoint, and it gets the job done. So should organizations, everybody should they just jump onto this bandwagon and start delivering immersive experience, or what should be their strategy in terms of creating and delivering immersive experience for their learners?
Okay, again, that's an interesting point, because what we talk about now is too extreme. One is like not very advanced technology like virtual reality or augmented reality, and we can also talk about something like a PowerPoint or a PDF based learning. And for me, it's not just the technology; it's the storytelling part. How effectively we are telling the story, and how convincingly we are telling the story. That's what matters, because you can't just think of virtual reality just to create a virtual environment and reproduce the same experience that they can easily achieve on a screen. So that doesn't make any sense. So unless you find a relevance to implement that kind of immersive experience, that doesn't make a sense. So I've seen like there is a virtual reality concept. Somebody goes into that, and there are questions and answers. We are basically going and selecting with your joystick or maybe touch and all those stuff. So yeah, that's a different media, but the effectiveness of or effective utilization of the features of that particular technology is not really comes there. But I've seen very low end tools are also used effectively to create learning content. For example, PowerPoint is in fact a powerful tool, I would say. So there are a lot of advancements done to that particular tool, and even we have done certain courses, trial courses with PowerPoint, where you can actually create interactivities within that using 3D models, and you can still build animations in PowerPoint. And because when you talk about PowerPoint, you have a picture in mind, okay? And when you see a very basic layout, then there is a comment, okay, this looks like PPT. So that was the mindset. But tools are just tools. Like if you have a good vision, then you can use the appropriate tool to deliver the content. That's what I think. Sometimes PowerPoint or maybe an interactive PDF will be the right tool to deliver something. So why not use that? We don't have to always think of high-end technology or immersive or any other stuff.
So are you basically saying that effectiveness, it takes precedence over tool or technology, and based on the effectiveness we can decide which tool will be compatible or help you achieve that goal?
Yeah, in the right design process, I would say you identify the problem, understand it properly, then you think of a solution that solves that problem, and then you think of the tool to solve that problem. Because if you're selecting the tool upfront, then I'm not sure how effectively you're going to solve the problem. So tools are just tools, like
sure.
That's what I think. But yeah, sometimes it makes sense when you really want to do something really outstanding and give a different dimension to it. So consideration like you put a heavy video based stuff, or you have a 3D or 3D uh, very engaging animations to it. It adds the richness or the engagement factor. But what we need to really think about is how effective the learning happens. So if that learning is achieved through a different tool or different methodology, then that's fine. So we can just go ahead with that.
Sure. I think you summed it up really well. That the way you explained the process of designing and developing e-learning courses. Start with the problem statement, understand your learner, design the solution, and when you design the solution, look at the tool, and not the other way around, where you select the tool and technology and then create a solution around it. I think that's a key takeaway from this episode. Thank you so much, Rajith, for joining. It's an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sajin. Thank you so much for this opportunity, because it was, I mean, good experience for me also to reflect whatever I had in my mind, because you never get these opportunities otherwise. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.